To the left, we have the 65-inch Sony A8G Bravia OLED from 2019. To the right, we have the Sony A95L from, obviously, 2023, this year. And the 55-inch is going to be the A95L to the right, and the 65-inch again, the A8G. Now, I'm doing this to prove a point. I have owned the A8G Bravia OLED for many years now. It is my personal TV. There is no kind of hate for Sony, so everything you're about to hear and see is Sony to Sony, so I would love to see how people are going to spin this one. Now, at a glance, colors like yellow particularly and orange look very identical and very similar. And if you just wanted to know like just the short end on which television wins the comparison, it depends on what you're watching, but they are very comparable. The edge is obviously towards the Sony A95L, and they ultimately do end up winning, but not by a lot. And you'll see it in a lot of these frames. And honestly, that alone for many people will be a reason why they don't go for it. They'll be like, okay, you know what? It's just not worth it once they see the differences between the two or lack thereof. So we're going to start with this example, and you're going to see, again, this is Demon Slayer, and we are quite literally on Hulu, and you can see that this is the Demon Slayer movie, I believe. No, this is the Demon Slayer arc for the Mugen Train arc or whatever it is. So season 1, episode 7, Set Your Heart Ablaze, right? And we're like 2 minutes and 20 seconds into it, and you can see all of that here. So again, very identical. I mean, really, like it would be very hard pressed to pick out the $3,000 TV in this example. In this example, you can see flames in particular and highlights in general. That's where the Sony A95L dominates and decimates the Sony A8G to the left. The colors, however, are pretty similar. It's just, again, when you talk about the color white, the A8G does not have that ability. And again, it's running off of the old school C10 panels that LG was providing in 2019. So this is back when reds particularly were just trash, right? So it's definitely going to struggle with reds, and it's going to struggle with brightness to a great degree, where from the C1 onward, LG really started hitting their groove. And I mean, obviously with the C3 and the G3, I mean, it's like a non-issue at this point. But we're looking at something that's a bit older in the pipeline and seeing how it does compare if you own one of these older products, which is, again, very important to see where we're coming from and where we're going. So you can obviously see the highlights are just way stronger all around. You can see it all through here, very impressive. And then we can see it here wrap around the cape and things like that. So not as much by comparison, but what I will say the older OLEDs did really well when they didn't have the brightness was the ambient glow on the character and the environment. So if you look around here, the cape just has that ambient glow from the fire, where again, because they're favoring highlights, they're just pumping up the white of this cape, but they're not giving you the ambient throw that you used to get. So again, that combined with the ambient glow on his face versus just a bright highlight to brighten up the face, these things do change the dynamic of the film, of whatever you're watching, and it makes it just a little bit different in terms of an artistic style. In this example, you can see a lot more color coming off of the Sony A8G Bravia OLED. I think this particular combination is going to be the strongest on something like the A8G. For whatever reason, the A95L does not reproduce the yellows and the cyans as richly as they used to in the past. And when you have combinations like this, where you can again see the yellow, rich yellow here, rich, beautiful cyan, all the different shades of cyan, where on here you don't really have as much. I mean, again, you do have the highlight advantage. So there's this beautiful highlight coming off of the top here when you look at the dress and the sun kind of coming through the water, reflecting all that. That looks good. But colors are taking a toll, where back in the day they didn't do that. And again, you can see everything like really just crystal clear. Like the amount of contrast, by the way, coming off of this, it's like way more than what's coming off of this. This is like, it's not, that detail is lost versus this where it is there. And again, both TVs have been fully optimized and fully calibrated, so this is just one of the downsides of owning something like the Sony A95L. This is where you're going to see probably one of the next biggest differences. So in combination, when you have the red and green complementary colors on the screen, you're going to notice that it just does something very differently, especially when we introduce skin tones. So the skin tones on the A8G Bravia OLED are just on another level. Like Sony, for whatever reason, they're just trying to brighten up her face way too much and make her look white, which again, it doesn't work for this particular type of scene. And just so everybody can see, I've gone ahead and shown the menu here, bottom right-hand corner. Expert 2 is what we're rocking. So I'm not rocking a cooler color temperature. If I were to do that, it would just start looking even worse. And disregard this. This is the HDR profile, which I told you, like when you go from one to another, that's another thing about the Sony. You just lose color temperature because the calibration lives on that color temperature pretty much forever. So that's why I'm using Expert 2, where it doesn't have this weird HDR tint to it. But again, that's neither here nor now. But if we were to use a cooler color temperature, the effect, the cool chilling effect would just get worse and worse. So again, I'm not doing anything to make it look cooler. It's just, that's just what Sony's new, that's just what they do now, right? They're all about like being overly cool for no damn reason. And I'm not with it. I think that what Sony used to do back in the day, where they would target skin tones correctly and they would give you the nice, proper, you know, adaptation of skin tones, I think that was masterful, right? Where now we just have something that's like really pale and not really what we want to see. And I mean, again, you can see it here in this example as well. She's laying on the ground. You would think that this is the WOLED with just how bad the skin tones are. They're not looking like they should, where again, back in the day, they just were doing something a little better in terms of skin tones. Now again, this is where you will also counteractively see exactly what I was talking about. Reds, they look like trash. So this is closer to that blood orange color. This is not the color red. I'm sorry. Sony has a lot of work to do back in 2019 if they're going to try to get to the level they are now, where this is a nice rich red. Now it is on the cooler side that does tend to favor more of a pinkish hue to it, so there is still work that Sony has to do to get away from how cool they make things. But again, this is why Sony goes to a cooler color temperature, because in doing that, colors appear more vibrant and people just go, wow, it's such a beautiful image. Without really comparing a properly calibrated image, you would never know these things, and that's just one of the many things that, again, we're doing in this comparison. So in this example of the Crudes 2, you can notice that, again, colors are just hitting very differently, and that, again, Sony tends to favor more these days of a very cold picture with a lot of highlights thrown behind them to increase that shock and awe, that kind of like dynamic mode feel, even after you've calibrated it, because that's just the way they've tuned their TVs from a processing standpoint, that they want to lean more towards cooler color temperatures than the warmer ones that unlock more shades of color. And again, that's pretty inaccurate, because it shouldn't just default to that no matter what you do. And that's one of my biggest gripes, because you can't unlock true expressions of color. Like if we look in this example, yeah, sure, you have highlights. They're wonderful highlights. They look great, but you don't have the realism in the skin's tonality or in the color brown and things like that. And again, when we go to images like this, you can see more of what I'm talking about, how again, it's just a richer image with a lot more gradients. So you can notice like the clouds, they look more realistic here because you're able to accurately target the shades of color that you need, versus on the Sony, it's just dark and it is really cool by comparison. So these are the things that do get a little annoying as we keep progressing further. Leaning back into skin tones, now we're starting with the animated film, again, the Crudes 2, to show you what I'm talking about. So if we look, again, her skin tone is bang on accurate. But over here, it's a little off. As you can see, there's a red push to it. Now, this is because we are using the BT 2020 color space. Now, some people might argue, what are you doing using the BT 2020 color space on SDR, which I'll just tell you, I'm also using BT 2020 on the TV to the left. So both are rocking the BT 2020 color space. But the difference is that back in the day, they did a better job of making sure that you had the precision color mapping working through their processing chipset to give you the color that you needed, where it does not seem to be happening that way here, where again, it's just red, and that is not correct or accurate in the least. And that is one of the biggest things that going, you know, forward to a quotation mark step-up model that you will lose. It's that accuracy behind color. Everybody lauds Sony as being color accurate, you know, because we remember Sony doing this. We remember colors still being accurate on BT 2020 on SDR, precision color mapping, you know, object-based HDR remastering, even for SDR. We remember this, right? And we're taking this accomplishment and we're applying it to this, and it doesn't apply because, as you clearly see, the red push is very real and skin tones become destroyed in near black scenes or low lit scenes. And here's yet another example of what I'm talking about, as you can clearly see in this example. Now, again, it's not to take anything away from the Sony A95L. They have a vibrant image and it's beautiful. Particularly, I'm noticing that the pink here really pops and stands out. However, if you pay attention to the generality of the scene, you can notice that, again, this is just going to be way more skin tone accurate, even right down to the hair being actual red hair, versus this where, again, it's a little bit more cool by comparison. Again, comparing BT 2020 to BT 2020 post-calibration, the A8G, right? The A8G to the left is just doing a better job. So that is something that you have to think about as, again, we're looking at the quotation mark next, latest and greatest, or king of TV. But again, that does not mean that the A95L cannot kick the absolute shit out of the A8G Bravia OLED. In scenes like this, you have a 3D picture basically that just draws you in, and I know you can see that on camera, where again, they don't have that here. So this is where the cognitive processor is doing something to, again, bring your attention towards the, again, main focal point your eyes are going to gravitate towards, where that technology wasn't invented, and therefore you do not have that effect on this display. Is it a great image? Yes, but it is nowhere near as immersive or three-dimensional as we have over here, and that is a big deal. Now, if we use skin tones from actual people, again, you can see this effect, what I'm talking about, where skin tones are just way more accurate on the Sony A8G Bravia OLED to the left versus what we have over here on the A95L. Again, the reason I'm doing this is because you will hear, not have heard, you will hear, if you look up the A95L, that it's the king of all TVs, it's just the best, it's the bee's knees, and they really start this hype train, right? Next year, they'll be right back with the next A95 series saying the exact same stuff, not telling you stuff like this at all. And they're damn sure not going to go back to when Sony was remembered for certain things and compare like I do. The reason I do this is because we're consumers. I'm a display scientist. I like this stuff, and I like to see an actual improvement. This is not an improvement, folks. I'll be very real with you. This is not an improvement in the area of skin tones because we are seeing a real-time downgrade. Yes, you have highlights, but it should not come at the expense of the accuracy behind skin tones where people look like people. And for those people saying that the Sonys from the past are just way too dim, look at this example right here. Look at Neo's face and tell me that it isn't every bit as bright as what we have on the Sony A95L to the right. The A8G is keeping up perfectly in this example, and I honestly could not tell a difference whatsoever as to which one would be the brighter TV. Moreover, I'm noticing more detail, and again, going back to skin tonality, Neo just looks like a human being that is not from a morgue, where it's hilarious that this is happening, and the relevancy of even mentioning that. The TV to the left is a WOLED. If you know anything about WOLED, they are not known for, super accurate skin tonalities because of the white subpixel. This is supposed to beat this by a massive margin, and it is not happening. Now, again, this has nothing to do with my settings or with tuning. I want both to win. And again, Sony to Sony, I've got no reason to have a TV from 2019 beat this TV. Smart money on YouTube in 2021 tells you this TV is crap. You need to upgrade to this. And also, there's a link down below. Click and, I get a commission. That's how the game works on YouTube. Don't believe me? Watch everybody that's talking about this TV and look for that blue link. Somewhere in their description, somewhere in their comment section. It'll be there, okay? I'm not selling anything. I'm telling you and educating you as to the differences as we progress through time so that you can know what you're buying and if it really is an upgrade. There is no money in that. A lot of people are not going to do that because it's not in their best interest. But I'll do it because it's fun. Oh, but don't think it's just your super bright scenes that's affected in this way. I mean, look at the agent here, okay? I think his name is Simmons. Don't hate me because I don't remember the name of every character in every movie. But, this agent right here looking absolutely incredible skin tonality-wise on the Sony A8G Bravia OLED. And again, the Sony to the right, the A95L, the proclaimed king by Value Electronics and a few other YouTubers and, publications. I mean, look at how it's doing. I mean, this is the point where I think everybody who's come out and said, like, it's king need to be embarrassed. I mean, because look, next example. I mean, really? Are we really going to still play games? Like, come on now. Sony is doing a great job on the A95L with this highlight right here and the brightness, right? You can see some gradation in color where it's a little bit stronger now. But here's the thing, and more examples than not, it tends to be like the biggest benefit of going towards the A95L, the highlights, the color red, and we start running out of rope really quickly after that. Like, in some scenes, you can get a really three-dimensional draw. Like in this scene, you do have a three-dimensional draw. It's slightly more than what we have on the A95L, or on the A8G Bravia OLED to the right. But it's not in every scene. It's not in every example. I mean, fire, explosions, that kind of stuff is really impressive. But I mean, can you really tell me that like what Sony is doing to the left is so bad that you would need to spend $3,000, an additional $3,000 to get there? I can't say that. I mean, I'm looking at both and I'm trying to justify it, but it's not justifiable. And that's where a lot of people have the protest, because they don't like that answer. Now, again, Sony with the new model will have the saturation advantage because the vibrancy is there, but vibrancy is not accuracy. And I think that is very important. Those are two very different distinctions. And Sony used to know this and used to give their all to, again, precision color mapping. Another thing that Sony used to do that is a bygone feature that they no longer offer anymore, right? I'll just go ahead and clear this out. They go hand in hand with cinema. They used to have under auto picture mode here something called 24p auto sync. This was a dream for everyone watching movies on a Blu-ray player that had 24p enabled. It was literally like smooth as butter. This is a feature that has gone missing on Sony. They don't do that anymore. Why? I couldn't tell you. It's like there are things with Sony that just don't make sense anymore. Now, ABL also is stronger though on the older model. So dimming happens a lot faster when you have a static image on the screen like I do here. So you'll notice now this is maintaining the brightness, but the colors also look better because it's going to maintain the brightness. So that's one of the things you have to think about. Now, again, there are examples like this one where the A95L just dominates. You're going to see the highlights, the practical lighting in the background way stronger, and that's where brightness is an advantage. Also, in the low light scenes, Sony does do a better job of illuminating the face, which allows things to be a little bit more visible. And in this scene, it just works. Again, it's not every scene, but there are scenes where it truly does work. Now, in this particular example, I do prefer the highlight blast 100% to the right on the A95L. That is just way better as far as the immersion of a car coming towards you as you're in a phone booth. However, it's the accuracy of every little detail in her shade, particularly her eyes. They're freaking to die for on the A8G Bravia OLED. The color of her lips, very natural. The skin tonality, again, very, very natural. It's like you're looking at a human being, like a real person. And that's the thing where, again, this is going for that shock and awe kind of vibe. And I don't know. I don't know what Sony's move is with this. I don't know why they're going that route, but I feel like they should give you the ability to tune it properly so that you don't have just the shock and awe look. And again, if we really wanted to, we could give the Sony a harder time by putting it into the professional mode just for everybody who's thinking maybe I'm being harsh to the Sony right now. I'll show you what that looks like. And that's what it would look like if we were to do this comparison in the reference accurate mode, the professional mode. So for every calibrator out there, like, you just have to professionally calibrate your set to the industry standards. Well, industry standard isn't BT 2020 and SDR content, and I'm on SDR content. So you be rocking Rec 709, and on top of that, you would also be rocking a really washed out version of it, like really washed out, and you're seeing it here. This is what they tell you should watch. I'm not going to tell you which one looks better. I'll let you make that determination, but I tell you right now, I would never watch the TV to the right. Couldn't pay me to do it. And I damn sure wouldn't pay $3,000 to have the lack of color throw that I see. So if you like Thor, well, there you go. That's what a professionally calibrated version of Thor would look like. Isn't that just beautiful? Can't we just see every amount of expression, color, and detail? I mean, my gosh, why wouldn't I want to watch this instead of this? I mean, after all my favorite professional calibrators like HDTV Test and people at Digital Trends and stuff like that told me that this is reference accurate and therefore that's what I should watch. You know, 100 nit calibrated Rec 709 on SDR content. That's the only way to do this. Obviously, if you rock BT 2020, you don't know what you're talking about or what you're doing, and you're just destroying the image. You're just oversaturating everything. You have no, like, this is the kind of crap that they have quite literally said, particularly Vincent Tio on HDTV Test. And yes, I name drop people because if you're going to say something that's so blatantly wrong, I'm going to mention it because, come on, man, like, there's a better way. And it doesn't have to be this way, right? You don't have to watch something that looks like crap. But they do, and they have no problems with it. And that's them, but that ain't me. I don't know. I like the way the red is just like absolutely popping here on the A8G Bravia OLED. That's absolutely incredible. Now, if we were going to do it Quantum's way and rock the settings the way I make settings on this channel and in this community, I'll show you what the Sony A95L will actually turn into. And just like that, it's back to where it's supposed to be. You have an image that makes sense and it looks absolutely incredible. But if you're a discerning eye like me, you're still going to notice certain differences, particularly just how beautiful the shades of blue are on the A8G Bravia OLED, and the skin tones are still more natural, albeit Sony is giving you a little bit better in the way of highlights on the right. So again, the same theme kind of continues to where, again, it's basically highlights versus skin and accuracy of skin and, you know, general colors in some examples. But again, this whole thing is really just to show you we are at a point of diminishing returns. Yes, newer is impressive and you do have bragging rights, but that doesn't always mean it's such a monumental step forward to the point where you need to just throw away everything that you own because they came out with the new model. Because as you're clearly seeing here, the new model doesn't always matter. The new model is not always going to get skin tones right. The new model is not always going to, I mean, like, come on. Really? Like, we're looking at something that is just showing us that right now on this example as well. Again, I don't know what YouTube's going to show you, but I'm looking at it with my naked eye and I'm just like, kind of like taken back. I'm like, wow, like in literally every example that I see, I'm just noticing that we're not getting what we are paying for when we go to the more expensive model all the time. And we hear nothing but the expensive model being the one that you want. Again, both are great TVs. Both have a ton of potential, but Sony needs to kind of snap out of it, get out of the clouds, get their head out of the clouds, and stop charging head in the cloud prices, because they are quite literally not improving. It's not as much of an improvement in every area like it needs to be, and skin tonality is one of them. Again, you guys see this comparison. You know what it is. And again, this isn't a knock on Sony. As you see, it's Sony versus Sony, and I own the A8G Bravia OLED, and I feel the need to say this because, hey, you know, there are always people trying to rebuttal that you're just doing this to hurt the new king, and you know, I see it like where it's like, what did Sony do to this man? And I'm just sitting here like, nothing, absolutely nothing. I have an A8G Bravia OLED, and I have had one for years. But I can tell you what Sony didn't do for this man. They didn't show me a $3,000 reason to buy their A95L, and maybe the people who already bought that are a little salty about that, so oof. I would probably return it and just buy the better product like I've been saying all along. But that being said, maybe you disagree with this, and if so, I would like to know why down below. As always, I want to thank you guys so much for watching the #1 brand in honesty, but in my personal opinion, I think we have reached the point of diminishing returns. Images like this kind of show that for me. But how about you? Again, let me know down below. Thanks for watching, and until the next video, I'll see you guys later.